Leon was 40 years old, made $64,000 a year as a municipal water systems technician for the city of Detroit, and he was sitting at a dinner table in a $740,000 Bloomfield Hills estate. Estate, listening to his own wife and her parents laugh at him. It wasn't just a chuckle. It was a full-throated, head-back, tear-dabbing performance of mirth. The source of their amusement was the centerpiece of the dinner itself, a cheap, $20 sheet cake from the grocery store. In sloppy blue frosting, it read, "So long, Leon. Don't let the door hit you." This was his farewell dinner. His wife of 12 years, Patrice, had announced a week prior that she was moving on to the next chapter of her life, a chapter that apparently did not include a man who spent his days covered in mud and grease, maintaining the very infrastructure that allowed their opulent world to function. The divorce papers were already drawn up by her father's shark of an attorney, a man who billed at $1,200 per hour. Leon was expected to sign them, pack his few belongings from the smallest guest room he'd been relegated to for the past 6 months, and disappear. "Oh, this is just too perfect," Patrice's mother, Eleanor, said, wiping a tear of laughter from the corner of her eye. She was wearing a silk blouse that cost more than Leon's monthly car payment. Her husband, Marcus, a man who had built a small fortune in automotive supply logistics, grinned, his perfectly white veneers gleaming under the light of the $3,000 crystal chandelier. "It was Patrice's idea," Marcus boomed, raising his glass of 20-year-old Macallan's Scotch, a bottle that retailed for $400. "A little blue-collar humor for our favorite blue-collar boy." Leon looked at his wife. Patrice, beautiful and cold in a $2,400 Burberry dress, just smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a victor, a queen dismissing a court jester. "Lighten up, Leon. It's just a joke. A little goodbye party." He felt a familiar, dull ache behind his ribs. For 12 years he had swallowed this. The casual dismissals, the condescending jokes about his profession, the constant reminders that he was maintenance, a temporary fixture in their world of glass towers and country club memberships. He had loved Patrice, or at least the woman he thought she was 12 years ago, a woman who had seemed impressed by his steady hands and his quiet competence. But that woman had long since been buried under a mountain of her parents' money and expectations. He had become a project, then a disappointment, and now, finally, a punchline on a grocery store cake. His $64,000 salary, every penny of which was poured into this house and this life, was an inconvenient fact they preferred to ignore. The $92,000 in annual household costs, from the mortgage contribution to the utilities to the landscaping, were sustained in large part by the very man they were mocking. He had no idea what was coming, but in that moment all he felt was the profound, hollow silence of his own defeat. But what did a man who spent his days fixing broken water mains really know about the intricate plumbing of a wealthy family's finances? They certainly didn't think he knew much, and for years he had let them believe it. It was easier that way. Have you ever been in a room where you were the only one who wasn't in on the joke? What do you do when the joke is your entire life? Share your story in the comments below. We read every single one. The facade of their domestic normalcy had been built on a foundation of Leon's paychecks and Patrice's expensive tastes. It was a life cataloged in receipts and bank statements that only Leon seemed to track. He remembered the day they moved into the Bloomfield Hills house, a sprawling 5-bedroom colonial that felt more like a corporate retreat center than a home. The asking price was $740,000. Marcus had provided the down payment as a gift, but the monthly mortgage payment of $4,500 was their responsibility, or rather, it became Leon's. "My salary will cover my personal expenses, darling," Patrice had explained. gesturing vaguely with a hand adorned with a freshly manicured set of $30 acrylic nails. You know, clothes, lunches with friends, my car. Her car was a white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 vehicle for which Leon's name was on the loan paperwork, a fact she conveniently forgot. Leon, driving his 10-year-old 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it, simply nodded. His salary, after taxes, was just over $4,000 a month. The math didn't work, but love, or what he thought was love, made him a poor accountant. He started taking every overtime shift he could get, spending his weekends in muddy trenches and damp access tunnels to keep their financial ship from sinking. Their life was a series of dollar-tagged scenes. A typical Saturday began with Leon waking at 6 a.m. to make coffee, using the $500 Breville espresso machine he'd bought her for Christmas. He'd walk through the living room, past the $9,000 Roche-Beaubois sofa they'd bought because Eleanor said their old one looked distressingly middle class, and out into the yard. He'd spend 2 hours mowing the lawn and trimming the hedges, saving them the $150 fee for the landscaping service. He did it because he genuinely enjoyed the quiet work, the smell of cut grass, but also because he knew they couldn't afford the service if he didn't. Patrice would wake around 9:30 a.m., wrap herself in a $600 cashmere robe, and complain about the noise of the lawnmower. "Can't you do that later, honey? I was having the most wonderful dream." Later, they would go grocery shopping. Leon would push the cart through the aisles of a high-end organic market, watching as Patrice filled it with $5 a pound organic apples, $20 bottles of imported olive oil, and $30 cuts of wild-caught salmon. The bill would regularly crest $300 for a week's worth of food. Leon would pay for it from their joint account, an account that was fed almost exclusively by his direct deposit. He remembered one specific trip where the total came to $387. He had just over $400 in the account until his next paycheck. As he swiped the card, he felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. That evening, Patrice mentioned that her mother was thinking of getting a new $8,000 patio set from Crate and Barrel, and that theirs was starting to look a bit tired. The normalcy was a performance. When her parents came for dinner, Patrice would orchestrate the evening like a theater director. She'd use the $500 set of Villeroy and Boque china Leon had bought for their 5th anniversary, and they'd drink wine from a $70 bottle she'd picked out. Leon would be tasked with grilling the steaks, $120 worth of prime ribeye from the specialty butcher. As he stood over the $5,000 Weber Genesis grill, a housewarming gift he had paid for, he could often hear their conversation drifting from the open kitchen window. It was never about him, but around him. "Is he still enjoying his work?" Marcus would ask, the slightest hint of a sneer in his voice. "He seems to," Patrice would reply with a sigh. "Someone has to do it, I suppose." The message was always the same. He was the help. He was the handyman, the financier, the groundskeeper. He was the sturdy, reliable infrastructure that allowed their beautiful lives to run smoothly. He was a utility, not a husband. He fixed things. He paid for things. He was, as Marcus had so crudely put it, just maintenance. And like any piece of maintenance equipment, they assumed he could be easily replaced when he was no longer needed. They had no idea how fundamentally he was tied into the very architecture of the house. He wasn't just the maintenance. In one critical way, he was the source. The cruelty didn't happen all at once. It was a slow drip, a steady erosion of his dignity over 12 years. The escalating betrayal was a symphony of 1,000 tiny cuts, each one delivered with a smile and a casual, dismissive wave of the hand. In the early years, it was subtle. Patrice would forget to introduce him at parties, or when she did, she'd gloss over his profession. "This is my husband, Leon. He works for the city." The ambiguity hung in the air, allowing her friends to assume he was a city planner or a financial administrator, not a man who carried a 40-pound wrench in the back of his truck. As her parents' wealth grew and their own lifestyle inflated to match it, the subtlety vanished. It was replaced by open condescension. The outrage accumulated in quiet, painful scenes that Leon replayed in his mind late at night. There was the incident at the country club. Marcus had sponsored them for a guest pass. They were having lunch on the veranda overlooking the pristine golf course. One of Marcus's friends, a real estate developer named Robert, joined them. "Marcus, you didn't tell me your daughter married one of the good ones," Robert had boomed, clapping Leon on the back. "What department are you in, son? Finance? Legal?" Before Leon could answer, Patrice cut in with a tinkling laugh. "Oh, nothing so glamorous. Leon works with his hands. He keeps the water running for all of us." She said it with a tone one might use to describe a particularly clever golden retriever. Robert's smile faltered. "Oh, I see. Well, that's important work." He quickly changed the subject to a recent yacht purchase. Leon sat there, his club sandwich tasting like ash in his mouth. He looked at Patrice, but she was already absorbed in the conversation about marina fees, her deep brown skin radiant in the afternoon sun, a perfect picture of unbothered elegance. He felt invisible. Then there was the matter of his family. Leon's mother, a retired nurse, lived in a modest but immaculate bungalow on the east side of Detroit. She was a warm, kind woman with a deep, infectious laugh. Her home was filled with the smell of baking bread and lemon polish. Patrice dreaded visiting. "It's just so small, Leon," she'd complain in the car on the way there. "And the neighborhood." She'd lock the doors of her BMW with an audible click as they drove down streets, lined with houses that looked like the ones Leon grew up in. One Christmas, Leon's mother gave Patrice a gift. It was a beautiful, hand-knitted Afghan, a complex pattern of deep blues and grays that had taken her over 100 hours to make. "I know it gets chilly in that big house of yours," she said, her eyes shining with pride. Patrice accepted it with a thin smile. "Thank you, Martha. It's very thoughtful." The next week, Leon found the Afghan in a donation bag in the garage, tucked beneath a stack of old magazines. When he confronted Patrice, she was completely unapologetic. "Leon, what am I supposed to do with that? It doesn't match any of our decor. It looks like something from a flea market. It's sweet, but it's a $20 ball of yarn, not an Hermes blanket." The Afghan had not cost $20. The yarn alone was over $100, but that wasn't the point. The point was the dismissal, the casual cruelty of treating a gift made with love like a piece of trash. The insults from her parents were more direct. Marcus, in particular, seemed to delight in reminding Leon of his place. During one of their Sunday dinners, Marcus had been pontificating about a new hire at his company. "Smart kid, MBA from Michigan. We're starting him at $120K. You gotta pay for talent." He then turned to Leon, a glint in his eye. "What's the going rate for a good plumber these days, Leon? I've always wondered." "I'm a water systems technician, Marcus," Leon said, his voice quiet but firm. "It's a bit different." "Technician, plumber, whatever. You fix pipes. The point is, you get what you pay for in this world." He took a long sip of his expensive wine, the silent implication hanging over the dinner table. "And we didn't pay much for you." The final act of betrayal, the farewell dinner, was merely the logical conclusion of this long campaign of humiliation. It started with Patrice's announcement a week before. She sat him down in the formal living room, the one with the Roche-Beaubois sofa he was still paying for. She was wearing an $870 Armani suit, having just come from a meeting with the divorce lawyer. "Leon, we need to talk," she began, her voice devoid of any emotion. "This isn't working anymore. I've been unhappy for a long time. I feel like we're on completely different paths." He listened in silence as she laid out the terms. She was keeping the house. She was keeping the car. She was keeping the furniture. He would be given 2 weeks to vacate the guest room. Her father had assured her the prenuptial agreement he had forced Leon to sign 12 years ago was ironclad. Leon, a 28-year-old man deeply in love, had signed the document without reading it too closely, a mistake he was now paying for. "I just don't see a future for us," she said finally. "My world is expanding, and well, you're happy where you are, and that's fine, but it's not for me." She looked at him, not with malice, but with a chilling indifference. "You're a good man, Leon. You're just not the right man for me anymore." The farewell dinner was the punctuation mark on that sentence. As he sat there watching them laugh at the cake, something inside him didn't break. It clicked into place. The years of quiet anger, of swallowed pride, of simmering resentment suddenly cooled and hardened into something else entirely. It was a cold, clear resolve. He looked at Patrice, at her laughing face, and for the first time he didn't feel hurt. He felt nothing. He was just looking at a stranger who had made a critical mistake. They all had. They had underestimated the maintenance man. They thought his job was just about fixing pipes. They had no idea that his job had also taught him exactly how systems work, where the shut-off valves are, and what happens when the source gets disconnected. The laughter from downstairs finally faded as Eleanor and Marcus left, their expensive shoes clicking on the hardwood floor of the foyer. Leon heard Patrice walk them to the door, the sound of air kisses and promises to talk tomorrow. He remained seated on the edge of the bed in the guest room. The door closed. The room was small, furnished with mismatched pieces from other parts of the house: a lonely armchair, a small desk, a lamp with a crooked shade. It was the room of an unwanted guest, not a husband. The plate with the slice of "so long, Leon." Cake sat on the desk, the blue frosting already starting to weep under the warmth of the lamp. He hadn't touched it. He heard Patrice's footsteps on the stairs, a pause outside his door. And then they continued down the hall to the master suite. She didn't even bother to knock to see if he was okay. To her, the evening was over. The joke had landed. The message had been delivered. Leon sat in the silence, the weight of the last 12 years pressing down on him. He felt a dull thrum of anger, but it was buried deep beneath a thick layer of exhaustion. He had given everything. He had worked himself to the bone, sacrificed his own modest dreams, and endured 1,000 humiliations, all to keep this fragile, glittering world intact for her. And for what? To be laughed out of his own life. He stood up and walked to the small desk. His work laptop, a rugged Panasonic Toughbook that cost the city $2,000, was sitting closed. He opened it. The machine whirred to life, its utilitarian design a stark contrast to the elegant, minimalist MacBook Air that sat on Patrice's desk in her home office. He connected to the house's Wi-Fi, a high-speed connection he paid $110 a month for. He didn't know what he was looking for. He just needed a distraction, a problem to solve, a system to analyze. It was what he did. He navigated to the Detroit Water and Sewerage Department's online portal. It was a clunky, outdated website, but he knew its every quirk and flaw. He used it daily for his job, pulling up schematics, checking compliance records, and reviewing service accounts. On a whim, he typed in the address of the Bloomfield Hills house. The property was technically outside his direct municipal jurisdiction, falling under a regional water authority, but the systems were all interconnected. All billing and service records were centralized. The page loaded slowly. He saw the account details pop up: account number, service start date, billing history, and then he saw it. A single line of text that made the air go still in the room. Guarantor of service, Leon J. Wallace. His name, not his and Patrice's, not Marcus's, who had so generously gifted them the house. Just his, Leon J. Wallace. He leaned closer to the screen, his heart starting to beat a little faster. He remembered it now, 12 years ago, when they were setting up the utilities for the new house. Patrice had been overwhelmed with picking out paint colors and furniture. "You handle all this boring stuff, honey," she had said, handing him a stack of forms. "You're so good at it." And so he had. He had filled out the forms, provided his social security number, his employment details, his professional license number as a certified water systems technician. At the time, it was just paperwork, a box to check. But he knew what it meant in the deep architecture of the utilities bureaucracy. The guarantor was the legally responsible party. They were the name on the line. They were the one whose credit was tied to the account. And more importantly, they were the only one who could authorize major changes to the service, including, he realized, authorizing a new guarantor. The system was designed to protect the utility, but it was also designed around a single point of authority. To change the name on the account, the new applicant would need to be approved, and the old guarantor, Leon, would have to sign off on the transfer. Without his signature, his authorization, the account was locked to him. And if the guarantor of service moved and officially changed their address with the department, the system would automatically flag the account. It would send a notice giving the residents 30 days to establish a new guarantor. If they failed to do so, for safety and liability reasons, the service would be suspended. It was 8:22 p.m. The chandelier downstairs was off. The house was quiet. In the master bedroom down the hall, Patrice was probably scrolling through Instagram on her $1,100 iPhone, cocooned in her world of perceived success. She had no idea that her entire lifestyle, the long, hot showers in her marble-tiled bathroom, the water that fed the underground sprinkler system for her prize-winning roses, the clean, clear water that filled her drinking glass, was all tethered to the man in the guest room, the man she had just dismissed as easily as she'd dismissed his mother's handmade gift. A slow smile spread across Leon's face. It wasn't a smile of malice or revenge. It was the calm, satisfied smile of a technician who had just found the master shut-off valve. He hadn't been looking for a weapon. He didn't want to cause a flood. But he had just discovered that he was the only one with the key to turn the water back on. And he was about to quietly walk out the door, taking the key with him. The inevitable drought was a problem of their own making. He was simply following procedure. The days following the farewell dinner were a master class in strategic restraint. Leon adopted a mask of placid resignation. He was a ghost in the magnificent house, his presence barely registering to Patrice. This was his playing dumb phase, a period of quiet evidence gathering and meticulous planning, all hidden behind a facade of defeated normalcy. Each lie he told was a small, necessary scene in the final act he was preparing. On Saturday morning, 2 days after the dinner, Patrice found him in the garage, carefully packing a cardboard box. He was wrapping his tools, the heavy-duty pipe wrenches, the socket sets, the specialized pressure gauges he owned personally, in old newspaper. These were not the tools the city provided. They were his own. A collection worth over $3,000 that he had accumulated over 15 years. "What are you doing?" she asked, her tone laced with impatience. She was dressed in $400 Lululemon athletic wear, ready for her 10 a.m. yoga class. "Just getting a head start," Leon said, his voice even and calm. He didn't look at her. "Clearing out some of my work stuff. Figured I'd put it in storage to make things easier when I go." "Oh, good idea," she said, already turning to leave. "Try not to make a mess. My parents are coming over for brunch. She didn't ask where he was going to go or what his plans were. His departure was a logistical problem she had already outsourced to him. That was lie number 1. The storage unit. There was no storage unit. Later that day, while she was at brunch with her parents, Leon loaded 3 boxes into the trunk of his Camry and drove to the east side. He pulled up in front of a small, neat duplex owned by his friend, Jamal, another technician from the department. "You sure about this, man?" Jamal asked, helping him carry a box up to the empty second-floor apartment. The apartment was small, with a faint smell of old paint and dust, but it was clean, and more importantly, it was safe. "I'm sure," Leon said. "I just need a place to land for a month or 2 while I get things sorted." This Patrice's idea of an amicable split? Jamal grunted, setting a heavy box of books down. "Something like that," Leon said. He handed Jamal $400 in cash. "First month's rent, I'll have the rest for the deposit next week." "You don't have to do that, Leon." "Your family?" The word family struck Leon. Jamal, a man he'd worked with for 5 years, called him family without a second thought. His own wife's family called him maintenance. The next lie came on Monday. He called the Human Resources Department at the city. He explained that he was going through a separation and needed to change his direct deposit information. He had opened a new personal checking account at a small credit union the previous Friday. He read the new account and routing numbers over the phone to the HR representative. That evening, Patrice was looking over the joint account statement online. "Leon, did you cancel your direct deposit?" she asked, a note of accusation in her voice. She was sitting at the kitchen island, her laptop open next to a glass of white wine. "No, of course not," he replied smoothly, walking past her to the refrigerator. This was lie number 2. "They're switching payroll systems down at the city. They said there might be a delay of a day or 2, or it might come as a paper check this week. It's a whole mess." "Ugh, typical government incompetence," she sniffed, satisfied with the explanation. "Well, make sure you deposit it as soon as it comes. The mortgage payment is due on the 1st. She had no idea that the account would never see another dollar from him. He spent the rest of the week methodically disentangling himself. He packed his clothes, his books, and the few personal items he had in the house. He packed the framed photo of his mother. He packed the worn copy of The Good Earth she had given him when he was a teenager. He did it all in short bursts, when Patrice was out of the house. To her, it just looked like the guest room was getting tidier. The biggest lie was one of omission. He never once mentioned the water account. He continued to act as if he were the one being discarded, the one with no power. He played the part of the defeated husband perfectly. He was quiet at dinner, which wasn't unusual. He answered her questions with short, non-committal answers. He was a model of compliance. The more agreeable he was, the less she saw him, and the more freedom he had to execute his plan. On his last day in the house, a Friday, exactly 2 weeks after the farewell dinner, he packed the last of his things into his Camry. Patrice watched him from the front door, her arms crossed. She was holding her phone, already texting someone. "So that's it?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. "That's it," he said, closing the trunk. "Where will you go?" The question was an afterthought, a flicker of what might have been common courtesy. "I've got a place," he said. Lie number 3, in its vagueness. He wasn't going to tell her he was in a cozy apartment on the east side, surrounded by people who cared about him. He let her imagine him in some dingy, $100 a night motel. "Well, good luck, Leon," she said, finally looking at him. There was no sadness in her eyes, only relief. "Try to land on your feet." "I always do," he said. He got in his old Camry, the engine turning over with a familiar, reliable rumble. He pulled out of the long, paved driveway for the last time, passing the perfectly manicured lawn and the prize-winning roses. He didn't look back. He had gathered his evidence, packed his bags, and lied his way to freedom. He was no longer playing dumb. He was just playing the long game. The next move wasn't his. It belonged to the system he knew so well. Leon's strategic planning wasn't about lawyers or courtrooms. It was a quiet, logistical insurgency. It was the methodical work of a man who understood that true power wasn't in loud confrontations, but in the control of essential systems. His war room was the spare bedroom in Jamal's duplex. His weapons were a burner phone he'd bought for $40 and a 3-ring binder. His first move, even before he left the Bloomfield Hills house, was securing his finances. The new checking account at the Detroit Municipal Employees Credit Union was the first step. The initial deposit was a mere $50, but the moment his next paycheck, $2,080 after taxes and deductions, landed there instead of in the joint account with Patrice, he felt a profound sense of liberation. He sat in his car during his lunch break and just stared at the balance on the mobile banking app. It was all his. Next, he created a budget. He sat at the small kitchen table in the duplex, a $75 piece he'd bought from a second-hand store, and laid out his new reality on a sheet of legal paper. His income, roughly $4,160 a month. His expenses were meticulously listed. Rent, $800, car insurance and gas, $250, groceries, $400, a fraction of what Patrice spent. Utilities for the duplex, $150. Phone bill, $60, for his old number, which he kept active for a specific reason. New burner phone, $40. Contribution to savings, $500. He calculated he would have nearly $2,000 left over each month. $2,000 that wouldn't be consumed by a $9,000 sofa or a $5,000 grill. For the first time in a decade, he felt like he could breathe. He was making $64,000 a year, and for the first time, it felt like it. His most critical strategic decision involved the water account. He knew he couldn't just call and have the water shut off. That would be an act of aggression, something Patrice's father and his $1,200 an hour lawyer could frame as malicious. No, his plan was far more elegant. It was based on procedure. On Monday morning, a week after moving out, at exactly 9:15 a.m., he made a call. It wasn't to the billing department, it was to the compliance division, a department he knew intimately. He spoke to a woman named Cynthia, a clerk he'd known for years. "Hey, Cynthia, it's Leon Wallace." "Leon, how are you, sweetie? Haven't seen you in the building in a while." "I'm good, can't complain." "Listen, I've got a quick procedural thing for you. I need to officially update my primary residence address on my employee file and my licensing records." "Oh, okay. Moving on up?" "Moving on," he said simply. He gave her the address of Jamal's duplex. "Can you make sure that's updated across all systems? My personnel file, my emergency contacts, and especially my master technician license record?" "Sure thing, honey. Give me 1 second." He heard her typing. "Okay, you're all set. 142B Elmwood Street. Got it." "Thanks, Cynthia. I owe you a coffee." "You always say that," she laughed, and they hung up. Leon knew exactly what he had just done. By changing his address on his master license record, he had triggered an automated flag in the Regional Water Authority's system. The system would cross-reference the guarantor on all active accounts with the licensing database. It would see that Leon J. Wallace, the guarantor for the Bloomfield Hills property, no longer resided at that address. An official notice of noncompliance would be generated and mailed to the service address. It would state that the current guarantor was no longer a resident and that a new qualified guarantor must be established for the account within 30 days, or service would be subject to interruption for regulatory and liability reasons. He had started a 30-day countdown clock, and he had done it using the system's own rules. There was no malice. It was just paperwork. He was simply a technician following procedure. The binder on his kitchen table held copies of everything: his new lease, the confirmation of his address change, a printout of the Water Authority's own bylaws regarding guarantor residency. He was not preparing for a fight. He was preparing a file that proved he had done everything by the book. The consequences were not his action. They were the system's reaction to his absence. He had simply left. And he had taken the foundation of their entire domestic ecosystem with him. For a month, there was silence. Leon went to work, came home to his quiet apartment, and started to build a new, simpler life. He cooked his own meals, read books, and spent weekends helping Jamal fix up the duplex. He felt a peace he hadn't realized he'd been missing for over a decade. He heard nothing from Patrice. The divorce papers arrived by certified mail, which he signed without contest and sent back. To her, he had vanished as requested. The strike happened not with a bang, but with the quiet cessation of a hum. It was a Tuesday, 32 days after Leon had updated his address. At the Bloomfield Hills estate, Patrice woke up at her usual 9:30 a.m. and padded into her enormous master bathroom. She turned the gold-plated handle on her multi-head $5,000 shower system. A pathetic gurgle and a dribble of brown-tinged water was the only response. She turned it off and on again. Nothing. Ugh, Leon probably cheaped out on the plumbing, she muttered to herself, annoyed. Old habits died hard. She tried the sink. A dry hiss. A flicker of genuine alarm went through her. She went downstairs to the kitchen and tried the pot filler faucet over the stove. Nothing. The entire $740,000 house was dry. Her first call was to a plumber. A local company dispatched a van within the hour. A man in overalls spent 20 minutes inspecting the pipes in the basement. "Ma'am, your plumbing is fine," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "You've got no pressure coming in from the street. Your water main is shut off. You need to call the water department." He charged her a $150 service fee for the diagnosis and left. Annoyed, Patrice called the Regional Water Authority. She spent 45 minutes on hold, listening to tinny classical music, before finally getting a representative. "Yes, my water is off," she said, her voice dripping with the impatience of someone who was not used to being inconvenienced. "I need you to send someone out to fix it immediately. The address is 18 Crestview Lane." There was a long pause filled with the sound of typing. "Okay, ma'am, I have your account here. I'm showing that service was suspended this morning due to a failure to establish a new guarantor of service." "A what? What does that even mean?" "We sent a notice to the service address 30 days ago, ma'am. The guarantor on record, a Mr. Leon J. Wallace, is no longer listed as a resident. Per our regulations, a new guarantor needed to be assigned to the account. Since no one responded, the system automatically suspended the service." Patrice was stunned into silence. Leon. It was something to do with Leon. "Okay, fine," she snapped. "Make me the new guarantor, whatever it is. Just turn it back on." "I can't do that, ma'am. To become the guarantor, you'll need to fill out an application, provide proof of income, and pass a credit check. Also, for service to be restored to a suspended account, we require authorization from the previous guarantor, Mr. Wallace, to release the account." "Are you serious?" Patrice shrieked into the phone. "This is my house. I own it. Just turn on the water." "I understand your frustration, ma'am, but that is our policy. It's for liability reasons. We cannot restore service without Mr. Wallace's authorization. The account is legally tied to him." After she hung up, fuming, she immediately called her father. Marcus was furious. "This is harassment. This is some petty little game he's playing. I'll have my lawyer on this so fast his head will spin." But the lawyer, after a few phone calls, came back with bad news. The utilities position is legally sound, Marcus. The service contract is with Mr. Wallace. He's the guarantor. They are following their own established, board-approved procedures. Suing them would take months and likely fail. The fastest way to resolve this is to get Mr. Wallace to cooperate. That's when the first call to Leon came. He was on his lunch break, eating a sandwich in his truck, when his old phone buzzed. It was Patrice. He let it go to voicemail. Voicemail 1, Patrice, angry. Leon, call me. Immediately. The water is off. Apparently, this is something you did. You need to fix it now. An hour later, another voicemail. Voicemail 2, Patrice demanding. Leon, I'm not kidding. I just spoke to the water company. They said you have to authorize this. Call them and authorize it. I don't know what kind of childish game you're playing, but it's not funny. Leon continued his workday inspecting a newly installed fire hydrant system on Jefferson Avenue. By late afternoon, the tone began to shift. Voicemail 3, Patrice, frustrated. Okay, Leon, look, I get it. You're mad. But this is ridiculous. I can't shower. I can't even flush the toilet. My parents are freaking out. Just, please, call the water company. We can talk about this. Then came the call from Marcus. Leon also let it go to voicemail. Voicemail 4, Marcus, threatening. Wallace, you listen to me. You think you're clever? I will bury you in legal fees. I will ruin you. You have 48 hours to fix this, or you'll be hearing from my attorney. And trust me, you do not want to hear from my attorney. Leon finished his shift, drove home to his quiet apartment, and made himself a simple dinner of chicken and rice. He checked his messages before going to bed. Voicemail 5, Patrice, pleading. Leon, please, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry if the dinner was insensitive. We were just joking. I had no idea this would happen. I can't live like this. I can't get a hotel because the whole neighborhood is talking about it. Eleanor's friend saw the plumber's truck. It's humiliating. Please, Leon, I'm begging you. What do you want? Money? Just tell me what you want. He wanted nothing from them. He deleted the voicemails. The silence that followed was more profound than any angry message. They had cut him off. And now he had, through his quiet, procedural departure, done the same to them. The system was just working as designed. The water was off, and only the maintenance man knew how to turn it back on. The consequences cascaded with the slow, inevitable force of gravity. The lack of water was not a simple inconvenience. It was a systemic failure that sent crack spiderwebbing through every facet of Patrice and her parents' carefully curated lives. Each downfall was a direct result of their own choices, a bill coming due for years of arrogance. First, there was the immediate financial bleed. After 2 days without water, Patrice, in a panic, ordered a bulk delivery of bottled water, a pallet of 1.5-liter bottles that cost her over $500. They stacked the cases in the garage, a monument to their desperation. The simple act of flushing a toilet now involved manually pouring 2 liters of expensive Fiji water into the tank. Cooking was a logistical nightmare. Personal hygiene was reduced to sponge baths, using warmed-up bottled water in a basin. The $9,000 Roche-Beaubois sofa became a place where Patrice sat and cried, surrounded by empty plastic bottles. Second, the social humiliation was swift and brutal. Bloomfield Hills was a community that ran on gossip. The news that the water was off at the prestigious 18 Crestview Lane spread like wildfire. Eleanor couldn't show her face at the country club. Her friends would ask, with feigned concern, "Eleanor, darling, is everything all right? I heard you were having some infrastructure issues." The subtext was clear. The family that prided itself on its perfect facade was publicly falling apart. They had to cancel their annual garden party, a major event in their social calendar, with the humiliating excuse of unforeseen plumbing problems. The prize-winning roses in the garden, no longer fed by the $150 a month sprinkler system, began to wilt and turn brown under the summer sun. Third, the legal and bureaucratic walls proved impenetrable. Marcus, accustomed to solving problems by yelling and throwing money at them, was completely neutered. His lawyer, the $1,200 an hour shark, was useless. "The contract is the contract, Marcus," he explained, his voice strained with the frustration of telling a powerful man something he didn't want to hear. "They will not act without his signature. We can file an emergency injunction, but a judge is likely to ask why Mrs. Patrice Wallace can't simply fill out the application to become a new guarantor." The problem, of course, was that Patrice's credit was abysmal. She had no steady income of her own, only a sporadic allowance from her father. She had thousands in credit card debt from her shopping habits. Her application for guarantor status was rejected within 24 hours due to insufficient income and poor credit history. Fourth, the house itself began to rebel. Without water, the complex systems within it started to fail. The high-efficiency boiler that provided heat and hot water registered a low-pressure fault and shut down. The toilets, without regular flushing, began to develop odors. The expensive garbage disposal seized up. The house, once a symbol of their status, was becoming a stagnant, smelly prison. They were living in a $740,000 campsite. The final and most devastating consequence was the slow dawning of their utter dependence on the man they had discarded. As the days turned into a week and the week into two, Patrice's voicemails to Leon became a case study in psychological collapse. Voicemail 6, pleading. "Leon, it's been a week. I'll pay you. I'll give you $10,000, cash. Just sign the paper, please." Voicemail 7, crying. "I don't understand why you're doing this to me. What did I ever do that was so bad? I loved you. I thought I did. How can you be so cruel?" Voicemail 8, numb. "The power went out today. A letter came from the electric company. Apparently that account is in your name too. They're going to shut it off in 10 days if a new guarantor isn't found." "Leon, what did you do?" Leon sat in his clean, quiet apartment, listening to this last message. He hadn't done anything. He had just left. He had filled out the forms 12 years ago, the boring stuff she hadn't wanted to be bothered with. He had put his name on the water account, the electricity account, the gas account, the internet account. He was the sole guarantor for the entire operational infrastructure of their lives. He had been the foundation, and now that he was gone, the whole house was collapsing. The total cost to rectify the situation, reconnection fees, new deposits under Marcus's name, plumbing and electrical inspections, was estimated by Marcus's frantic accountants to be over $25,000, not including the legal fees. All of it could have been avoided with a single, courteous phone call. But they had thrown him a farewell party instead. And now they were living in the dark, silent house they deserved. 2 years passed. The rain that had been falling on the night of the farewell dinner felt like a distant memory, washed away by the steady sunlight of a new life. Leon, now 42, stood on the freshly repaired porch of a small bungalow in Detroit's Bagley neighborhood. He wasn't just a technician anymore. He was the owner and sole employee of Integrity Flow Plumbing and Water Systems, LLC. The name was important to him. His 2012 Toyota Camry was gone, replaced by a gleaming white Ford Transit van, a $45,000 investment in his future. The side was emblazoned with his company logo, a simple drop of water cradled in 2 hands, and his phone number. Business was steady. He had built a reputation on being honest, fair, and incredibly competent. His clients were mostly elderly homeowners in the surrounding neighborhoods, people who were often taken advantage of by less scrupulous companies. Leon never overcharged. He explained every repair, showed them the worn-out parts, and his bills were always exactly what he quoted. His $64,000 salary was a thing of the past. His first full year in business, he had grossed over $120,000. He had used his new income to purchase a small duplex on the west side for $85,000. He lived in the bottom unit and rented the top unit to a young teacher, creating a stable, passive income stream. His apartment was no longer cramped. It was a home. The walls were painted a warm gray, and the rooms were filled with sturdy, comfortable furniture he had bought and paid for himself. On a small table by the window sat a framed photograph of his mother, right next to a thriving green plant. The space was a reflection of him, solid, functional, and peaceful. It was a home built on a foundation of his own hard work, not a precarious facade funded by debt and disrespect. He was finishing a job for a woman named Mrs. Henderson, an 80-year-old widow whose kitchen sink had been leaking for months. He had replaced the entire faucet assembly and fixed a corroded pipe, charging her only for the parts and a modest 2 hours of labor, a total of $220. "Oh, Leon, thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The last man who came out wanted to charge me $800. He said I needed all new pipes under the house." "Your pipes are old, but they're solid cast iron, Mrs. Henderson," Leon explained, wiping his hands on a clean rag. "This faucet was the only problem. You should be good for another 20 years. She pressed a folded $20 bill into his hand. "You get yourself a nice lunch, you hear? You are a good man. A blessing." He tried to refuse, but she insisted. Driving away in his new van, the sun warm on his face, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction that no amount of money from Patrice's world could ever buy. He wasn't just maintenance. He was a necessity. He wasn't just a utility. He was a source of help and comfort for his community. That evening, as he was relaxing on his couch, his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "I sold the house. I had to. I'm living in a condo in Royal Oak now. I heard you started your own business. That's good. I'm happy for you. I was thinking about you today. I'm sorry, Leon, for everything." It was Patrice. He read the message once. He felt no anger, no satisfaction, no pity. It was like reading a notice about a change in a distant utilities billing policy. It was just information, and it no longer had anything to do with him. He held his thumb over the screen, over the options to reply or to block. He did neither. He simply deleted the message and turned his attention back to the book he was reading. The water under that bridge had long since run dry. True wealth isn't found in the sprawling estates of Bloomfield Hills or in the gleam of a $9,000 sofa. It's not measured by the price tag on a dress or the age of the scotch in your glass. Real wealth is the skill in your hands. It's the integrity in your heart. It's the peace you feel when you turn the key in the door of a home you built yourself. A home where you are valued not for what you provide, but for who you are. It's the quiet satisfaction of a job well done and the respect you earn from the community you serve. Don't ever let anyone tell you that your work, your contribution, is just maintenance. The people who keep the water flowing, the lights on, and the world running are not footnotes in someone else's story. They are the foundation of everything. What does true wealth mean to you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Your story matters to us. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of love, loss, and the quiet triumph of integrity.